I'm Rebecca Mitchell, 38 years old, standing in the pouring rain across from what used to be my home. Through the window, I can see Stephanie, my sister, laughing with Michael, my husband, while Emma and Noah, my children, set the dinner table. This was my life before she systematically dismantled it, piece by piece. We were close once, sharing secrets under blanket forts. Everything changed when Uncle Frank died, leaving behind more than just memories. Today, after 3 years of hell, I'm finally reclaiming what's rightfully mine. My phone buzzes Uncle Frank's lawyer with news about the will that will change everything. Before I continue my story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Hit that like button if you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, and subscribe to join our community of survivors. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. Growing up, Stephanie and I were inseparable despite our 2-year age gap. As the older sister, I naturally fell into the responsible role straight-A student, class president, the dependable daughter who always made our parents proud. I worked hard for everything I achieved, staying up late, studying while Stephanie seemed to coast through life on her natural charm and beauty. "Becca, why do you try so hard?" Stephanie would ask, sprawled across my bed while I hunched over textbooks. "Mom and Dad will love us regardless." But that wasn't entirely true. Our parents had different expectations for us. They pushed me to excel while accepting Stephanie's mediocrity with fond sighs and gentle reprimands. It created a pattern that would follow us into adulthood. I worked twice as hard for recognition while Stephanie received praise for minimal effort. Despite this imbalance, I loved my sister fiercely. When neighborhood kids teased her for her lisp in 3rd grade, I bloodied Jimmy Peterson's nose defending her. When she failed algebra in high school, I stayed up all night helping her prepare for the makeup exam. That's what sisters do, I thought. We protect each other. College separated us for the first time. I earned a scholarship to business school while Stephanie bounced between community college programs, never quite finding her passion. During those years apart, I began to flourish without her shadow. I made genuine friends who appreciated my drive rather than competing with it. I excelled in my marketing courses and secured an internship at Wilson & Blake, one of the most prestigious firms in the city. "You've always been the smart one," Stephanie would say during holiday breaks, a hint of something envy, resentment, flickering behind her smile. "I'm just the pretty face." I never saw the warning signs in those self-deprecating comments. Instead, I encouraged her, assured her of her own talents, tried to help her find direction. That's what good sisters do, right? After graduation, I quickly climbed the corporate ladder at Wilson & Blake. By 27, I was heading my own team, commanding respect in boardrooms filled with men twice my age. Meanwhile, Stephanie drifted between retail jobs and failed relationships, often showing up at my apartment after breakups, mascara streaking her cheeks. And then I met Michael. He wasn't like the finance bros and marketing executives who typically asked me out. Michael was thoughtful, creative, an architect with a passion for sustainable design. On our first date, he sketched a tiny house on a napkin, explaining how he wanted to revolutionize affordable housing. I fell hard and fast. "He's different," I told Stephanie over brunch, 6 months into our relationship. "I think he might be the one." She smiled, squeezing my hand. "I'm so happy for you, Becca. You deserve someone special." When Michael proposed a year later, Stephanie was the first person I called. She squealed appropriately, demanded to see the ring immediately, and volunteered to be my maid of honor. Together, we planned a tasteful autumn wedding at a renovated barn upstate. The day before my wedding, I found Stephanie trying on my wedding dress. "I just wanted to see how it looked," she explained, twirling before the mirror. "We have almost the same figure, don't we?" At the reception, she gave a maid of honor speech that somehow centered around her childhood achievements and concluded with a tipsy rendition of "Wind Beneath My Wings" that left guests exchanging uncomfortable glances. Michael assured me later it was endearing, but something about it felt off, like she was competing with me on my own wedding day. Life moved forward rapidly after that. Michael and I bought a charming colonial in the suburbs. 2 years later, I gave birth to twins, Emma and Noah. Despite 14-hour workdays managing major accounts at the firm, I embraced motherhood with the same determination I brought to everything else. Stephanie remained a constant presence in our lives. She was the fun aunt who spoiled the twins with noisy toys and sugar highs. Initially, I appreciated her involvement. She'd babysit when deadlines loomed, bring dinner when I was too exhausted to cook. Michael seemed to enjoy her company too, laughing at her jokes, defending her when I occasionally expressed frustration at her impromptu visits. "She's family, Rebecca," he'd say, "and she adores the kids." Looking back, I should have noticed how she slowly infiltrated every aspect of my life. How she began dressing like me, using the same perfume, even adopting my mannerisms. How the kids would sometimes slip and call her mommy before correcting themselves with giggles. How Michael's eyes lingered on her just a second too long. But I was too busy juggling career and family, too trusting of the sister I'd protected all my life, too confident in the stability of everything I'd built. In my darkest moments now, I sometimes open the small leather journal I keep hidden in my apartment. On the first page, dated 3 years ago, I wrote, "Today I realize Stephanie doesn't want to be like me. She wants to be me. If only I'd understood then how far she would go to make that happen." The first domino fell 5 years into my marriage, when Stephanie showed up at my door with eviction papers and a story about a roommate who'd skipped town, leaving her with unpaid rent. She was broke, desperate, and needed a place to stay just until I get back on my feet. Michael suggested the guest room without consulting me. "It's only temporary," he assured me. "Plus, the kids will love having her around." 2 weeks stretched into 2 months. Stephanie's job search seemed perpetually stalled until I came home one evening to find her crying at the kitchen table. "I'm such a failure," she sobbed. "You have everything figured out, and I can't even land a basic job." The solution seemed obvious. Wilson and Blake was expanding the social media department. With my recommendation, Stephanie could get her foot in the door. I'd be helping my sister while keeping her job search supervised. Win-win. "You'd do that for me?" Stephanie wiped her tears, eyes brightening. "But I don't have your experience." "Everyone starts somewhere," I said, already drafting an email to HR in my head. "Just work hard and learn quickly." Within a week, Stephanie was hired as a social media coordinator, several rungs below me on the corporate ladder, but with decent pay and benefits. I introduced her to colleagues, explained company culture, even lent her some of my professional clothes. I was proud to help her find stability. For the first few months, everything seemed perfect. Stephanie was punctual, enthusiastic, and apparently good at her job. Senior management noticed her quickly, not surprising given her natural charisma and ability to light up a room. I was genuinely happy for her success, even bragging about her progress to Michael. "Your sister's presentation today was impressive," my mentor Barbara commented during a strategy meeting. "That Instagram campaign concept might be exactly what Luxe Cosmetics is looking for." I frowned, confused. "Instagram campaign? That wasn't in the brief I saw." Barbara looked equally confused. "Stephanie said you two had been brainstorming it together, that you were too busy with the Henderson account to present it yourself." Ice formed in my stomach. The Luxe Cosmetics account was mine, a client I'd personally brought in and nurtured for 3 years. I hadn't authorized any Instagram campaign, and I certainly hadn't collaborated with Stephanie on one. That evening, I confronted her in the guest room, which now looked permanently settled with her photographs on the walls and her extensive shoe collection spilling from the closet. "It was just a misunderstanding," Stephanie insisted, eyes wide with practiced innocence. "Barbara asked for ideas, and I mentioned something we'd talked about at dinner last week. I thought you'd be happy I was contributing." I didn't recall any such dinner conversation, but Stephanie was so convincing I second-guessed my own memory. "Next time, run things by me first," I said finally. "We need to present a united front to clients." She hugged me, all contrition. "Of course, Becca. I'm still learning the ropes." But similar misunderstandings multiplied over the following months. My ideas appeared in Stephanie's presentations, My clients began contacting her directly with questions. Colleagues who once sought my input now clustered around Stephanie's desk, laughing at her jokes, accepting her lunch invitations. The annual review period brought the next shock. Barbara called me into her office with a concerned expression. "Rebecca, your performance this past year has been uneven. Several clients have mentioned communication issues." "Communication issues?" I echoed. "Which clients?" "Lux for one. Continental Hotels. They say their emails go unanswered for days." "That's impossible. I respond to everything within hours." Barbara slid several printed emails across her desk. They were indeed from my clients, but addressed to my personal email rather than my work account, an address I rarely check during business hours. Someone had been redirecting my professional correspondence. The company restructuring announcement came 3 weeks later. Due to evolving client needs and digital-first strategy shifts, several positions were being eliminated or consolidated. My team was disbanded, with most members reassigned to the expanding social media department, now headed by newly promoted director Stephanie Mitchell. My own position was reconfigured into a support role with a significant pay cut. The official explanation cited my inconsistent client management and resistance to digital innovation. When I requested a meeting with the CEO to explain the sabotage, I was told he was unavailable, but that Stephanie had already discussed my performance issues with him at length. Apparently, she'd been playing golf with the executive team for months, something I'd never been invited to do despite my seniority. The final humiliation came when security escorted me to clean out my office, while Stephanie watched from her new corner suite, concern perfectly arranged on her face for witnesses, but a small, satisfied smile, when only I could see. "I'm worried about you, Becca," she told Michael that night, as I sat numb at our kitchen table. "She's been so stressed lately, almost paranoid, blaming others for her mistakes." "I didn't make mistakes," I said hollowly. "She sabotaged me." Michael exchanged a glance with Stephanie, a private communication that excluded me. "Honey, companies restructure all the time. It's nothing personal." But it was personal, devastatingly so. When I submitted my resignation the following week, no one seemed surprised. No one fought for me to stay. 7 years of dedication erased, my professional reputation in tatters. That night, I had my first major breakdown, sobbing in the shower where the kids couldn't hear me. I felt utterly betrayed not just by Stephanie, but by colleagues I'd considered friends, by a company I'd helped build, by a system that rewarded manipulation over merit. When I emerged red-eyed from the bathroom, Stephanie was sitting on my bed. "I know you're upset with me," she said softly. "But maybe this is an opportunity. You've always worked so hard, now you can spend more time with the twins. They need their mother." Something in her tone made my skin crawl. As if she'd orchestrated my professional demise for my own good. As if she knew better than I did what my children needed. I looked at my sister, my flesh and blood, and for the first time saw a complete stranger. Unemployment hit harder than I'd anticipated. After years of defining myself through professional accomplishments, I suddenly had no deadlines, no meetings, no purpose beyond domestic tasks I'd previously balanced alongside a demanding career. Depression settled over me like a heavy fog, making even simple decisions feel overwhelming. Michael seemed sympathetic at first, assuring me I'd find another position quickly. "With your experience, companies will be fighting to hire you." But as weeks passed without promising leads, his encouragement soured into criticism. "Maybe if you networked more instead of moping around the house." The twins, now 8, sensed the tension. Noah became withdrawn, while Emma developed mysterious stomach aches before school. I tried compensating with elaborate home-cooked meals and Pinterest-worthy crafternoons, but my heart wasn't in it. They wanted their confident, energetic mother back, not this hollow-eyed imposter who burst into tears over spilled juice. Meanwhile, Stephanie remained ensconced in our guest room, now the family breadwinner alongside Michael. She'd leave each morning in sharp suits and return with animated stories about the creative campaigns she was spearheading my former clients, my former team. Michael hung on every word, asking questions he'd never bothered to ask about my work. "You should be grateful your sister's helping out financially," he remarked one evening, after I'd withdrawn from dinner conversation. "We couldn't manage on just my salary with the new mortgage rate." The comment stung. I'd contributed twice his income for years without ever making him feel inadequate. Now he wielded our reversed fortunes like a weapon. Stephanie's support manifested in increasingly intrusive ways. She began buying groceries without consulting me, rearranging kitchen cabinets to her preference, scheduling the twins' playdates and doctor appointments. When I objected, she'd blink innocently. "I'm just trying to help, Becca. You seem so overwhelmed lately." The first suspicious text appeared on Michael's phone, 3 months after my resignation. He'd left it charging in the kitchen while showering, and a notification illuminated the screen. "Can't wait for tomorrow. Wear that blue shirt I love. S." My hands trembled as I entered his passcode, his birth year, unchanged since college. His message history with Stephanie stretched back months, far beyond professional check-ins or family coordination. Pet names, inside jokes, late-night exchanges when I thought he was working. When confronted, Michael exploded. "You're spying on me now? This is exactly why people are worried about you." "People, or just Stephanie?" "Everyone. Barbara called me last week, concerned about your behavior during exit interviews, your paranoia, your accusations. Now you're inventing conspiracies about your own sister? Then explain the texts, Michael. Explain why my sister is texting my husband about how he should dress." His explanation was rehearsed, too smooth. "She's helping me prepare for the Henderson presentation. The clients responded well to my blue suit last time. It's completely innocent, but your reaction proves how irrational you've become." I didn't believe him, but the seed of doubt he'd planted took root. Was I becoming paranoid? Was grief over my career clouding my judgment? I agreed to see a therapist, Dr. Kellerman, recommended by Stephanie's friend. Marriage counseling followed, but felt strangely one-sided. Dr. Kellerman focused on my adjustment issues and displacement of anger, while Michael's emotional distance was framed as a natural response to my instability. Sessions ended with homework for me, journaling exercises, meditation practices, while Michael received validation for his patience during this difficult time. Isolation crept in gradually. Friends from work stopped calling, presumably warned about my mental state. Neighborhood couples declined our dinner invitations. Even my parents seemed to favor Stephanie's version of events during their monthly visits. "She's under tremendous pressure at work," my mother explained when I mentioned Stephanie's takeover of my household. "It's so generous of her to help with the children despite her responsibilities." The credit card statements brought the next revelation. Charges for jewelry I'd never received, dinners at restaurants I hadn't visited, a weekend at a lakeside hotel during a time Michael had claimed to be at a conference. When I called the hotel, they confirmed Mr. and Miss Mitchell had indeed enjoyed their stay in the honeymoon suite. They hadn't specified which Miss Mitchell. Stephanie's presence in our home intensified. She began cooking Michael's favorite meals, wearing subtly similar versions of my clothes, using my signature perfume. The bathroom counter gradually filled with her products, displacing mine to the medicine cabinet. She volunteered to drive the twins to school, attended their parent-teacher conferences when I had job interviews, helped with homework in the evenings. "The kids adore her," Michael commented, as if this should comfort rather than devastate me. The moment of undeniable truth came on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd returned early from a disappointing job interview, silently entering through the side door to avoid conversation. Voices drifted from the kitchen, Michael and Stephanie, speaking in hushed, intimate tones. I froze in the hallway, heart hammering. "We can't keep doing this," Michael was saying. "She suspects something." Stephanie's laugh, the same laugh I'd heard all my life, now laced with something predatory. "Rebecca suspects everything and nothing. She's so lost in her own head, she can't see what's right in front of her. The kids are noticing. Noah asked why I was kissing Auntie Steph yesterday. What did you tell him? That families show affection in different ways. That his mom is going through a difficult time and we're comforting each other. Perfect answer. Stephanie's voice dropped lower, seductive. We just need a little more time. Dr. Kellerman thinks she might benefit from inpatient treatment. A psychiatric facility? Isn't that extreme? It's for her own good, Michael. Remember how she screamed at that barista last week? Her paranoia is escalating. What if she becomes dangerous? I had never screamed at any barista. The fabricated incident chilled me more than catching them in an affair would have. They weren't just betraying me, they were constructing an alternate reality, gaslighting me toward an institutional commitment. I stepped into the kitchen doorway just as Stephanie pressed herself against my husband, his hands automatically finding her waist, a practiced, familiar gesture. Dangerous? I said quietly. Is that what I am now? They sprang apart, twin expressions of guilt morphing quickly to concern. Rebecca, Michael began. This isn't what it looks like. It looks like my sister and my husband discussing having me committed while they continue their affair in my home. Stephanie stepped forward, hand outstretched. Becca, you're not well. You're twisting things, hearing what you want to hear. I heard every word. How long has this been happening? See? Stephanie turned to Michael, voice dripping with manufactured worry. This persecution complex, these accusations, exactly what Dr. Kellerman warned us about. Something snapped inside me, not toward violence as they clearly hoped, but toward clarity. The fog of confusion and self-doubt evaporated, replaced by ice-cold understanding. This had been Stephanie's plan all along, not just to take my job or seduce my husband, but to systematically replace me in every aspect of my life. I walked out without another word, packed a small suitcase, and checked into a motel across town. That night, I called Jill Ramirez, the one colleague who'd remained supportive after my departure from Wilson and Blake. I need a place to stay, I told her through tears. And I need a good divorce lawyer. Jill's spare bedroom became my sanctuary for the next few weeks. A graphic designer who worked remotely, she gave me space during the day and provided quiet companionship in the evenings, exactly what I needed to process the implosion of my life. My sister had always been envious. I explained over cheap wine and take-out Chinese, but I never imagined she'd go this far. Some people don't want to build their own happiness, Jill observed. They'd rather steal someone else's. Michael filed for divorce 3 days after I left, citing irreconcilable differences and requesting emergency temporary custody of the twins. His affidavit described my increasingly erratic behavior, unfounded accusations against family members, and voluntary abandonment of the marital home. Attached were statements from Dr. Kellerman detailing my paranoid tendencies and difficulty distinguishing reality from persecutory fantasies. The temporary custody hearing blindsided me. I'd expected standard divorce proceedings with mediation and gradual custody arrangements. Instead, I found myself defending my mental stability before a skeptical family court judge. Mrs. Mitchell, Judge Harmon peered over reading glasses. Your husband has presented concerning testimony about your recent behavior. Can you explain why you abruptly left the family home without making arrangements for your children? My lawyer, Paula Bennett, had warned me to remain composed regardless of provocation. I gripped the edge of the table, steadying my voice. Your Honor, I left because I discovered my husband's affair with my sister, who has been living in our home. I feared for my emotional safety but have been in daily contact with my children via phone calls. Michael's lawyer pounced. Mrs. Mitchell has made these accusations repeatedly without evidence. Meanwhile, her sister has graciously provided childcare during this difficult time, allowing the children's routines to continue uninterrupted. Stephanie herself testified next, the perfect picture of concerned, sisterly devotion in a modest navy dress and minimal jewelry. I've tried so hard to support Rebecca, she said, dabbing at invisible tears. After her professional setbacks, she became increasingly paranoid, imagining conspiracies at work and at home. She accused me of stealing her career, Her husband, as if these were possessions rather than people with their own agency. The calculated nature of her performance made me physically ill. This wasn't just manipulation, it was character assassination by someone who knew all my vulnerabilities, all my insecurities. The judge granted temporary primary physical custody to Michael, with supervised visitation for me twice weekly. Until Mrs. Mitchell can provide documentation of psychological treatment addressing these concerning behaviors, he added. Outside the courtroom, I confronted Michael while our lawyers exchanged documents. How can you do this? They're my children too. For a moment, guilt flickered across his face. You need help, Rebecca. Once you're better, we can revisit the custody arrangement. Better? Or just compliant enough to accept being erased from my own life? The first supervised visitation crushed what remained of my heart. We met at a sterile family services center, where a bored social worker monitored our interaction from the corner of a room filled with generic toys. Emma ran to hug me, but Noah hung back, regarding me with wary confusion. Daddy says you're sick in your head, he stated with 8-year-old bluntness. That's why you went away. I'm not sick, sweetheart, I said carefully, aware of the social worker's clipboard scratching. Sometimes adults disagree about important things, and I needed some time to figure things out. Aunt Stephanie says we shouldn't upset you by asking questions. The casual mention of Aunt Stephanie in this context sent ice through my veins. You can always ask me anything, Noah. I'll tell you the truth. Emma tugged at my sleeve. Aunt Steffi sleeps in Daddy's room now. She says she's going to be our new mommy soon. The social worker looked up sharply, making a note. The visitations grew increasingly strained. The twins arrived with stories about fun outings with Daddy and Steffi, new toys and clothes Stephanie had bought them, special meals she prepared. They accidentally called her mom with increasing frequency, correcting themselves with guilty glances toward me. The court-ordered psychological evaluation felt designed to confirm a predetermined diagnosis. Dr. Patel, the court-appointed psychiatrist, seemed fixated on my jealousy toward my more successful sister and inability to accept the end of my marriage, dismissing my detailed timeline of Stephanie's systematic takeover. Mrs. Mitchell, do you realize how implausible your accusations sound? He asked during our third session. That your sister orchestrated losing your job, stealing your husband, and alienating your children all as part of some grand plan to replace you? When you isolate each event, it sounds paranoid, I conceded. But the pattern is undeniable. Patterns are often what the human mind imposes to make sense of random events, he replied, writing something in his notebook. My breakthrough came unexpectedly through Sarah, Emma's dance teacher, who approached me after a supervised visitation that coincided with ballet class. I've been wanting to talk to you, she said quietly, glancing at the social worker engaged with paperwork. Something feels off about your sister and your husband. The way they present themselves as the twins' parents, the things they say about you, it doesn't match the devoted mother I've known for 3 years. That small validation from an objective observer kept me functioning through the weeks that followed. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining the systematic erasure of my existence. The custody hearing revealed the full extent of Michael and Stephanie's deception. Their lawyers presented a narrative of my mental deterioration, following career disappointments, painting Michael as the stable, nurturing parent, and Stephanie as the selfless aunt, supporting a family in crisis. My angry outburst during cross-examination didn't help my case. When Michael's lawyer suggested I had abandoned my family in a fit of paranoid delusion, the weeks of injustice boiled over. My sister is sleeping with my husband in my bed, wearing my clothes, using my perfume, and turning my children against me, I shouted, rising from my chair despite Paula's restraining hand. She took my career, my home, and now she's taking my children while everyone acts like I'm the unstable one. Judge Harmon banged his gavel. Mrs. Mitchell, control yourself or I'll hold you in contempt. The final custody decision granted primary physical custody to Michael, with supervised visitation for me gradually increasing contingent upon demonstrated psychological stability. The court mandated therapy for the twins to help them process their mother's behavior, with Dr. Kellerman, Stephanie's ally, recommended as the provider. Leaving the courthouse, I overheard Emma asking, "Does this mean Aunt Steffi is our mom now?" Michael's response, "She loves you very much and has always been part of our family." I stood frozen on the courthouse steps, watching them drive away in what used to be my family SUV. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd loved, everything that defined me gone. Stolen not by a stranger I could righteously hate, but by the sister I'd protected and supported all her life. That evening, alone in Jill's guest room, I experienced my second major breakdown. This one wasn't loud or dramatic, just a hollow emptiness, as I realized I no longer knew how to rebuild from these ashes. The following months passed in a blur of meaningless routines. I found a small studio apartment I could barely afford on my unemployment benefits, applied for marketing positions far below my qualifications just to make rent, endured humiliating supervised visitations where my children felt increasingly like strangers. The job I eventually secured, retail sales at a shopping mall, paid minimum wage, and required me to sometimes help customers who'd been junior associates on my former marketing team. The pitying glances and whispered conversations when they thought I wasn't looking cut deeper than outright cruelty would have. My attempts to maintain connections with Emma and Noah faced mounting obstacles. Visitations were accidentally scheduled during their favorite activities. They arrived tired or hungry, making meaningful interaction difficult. Phone calls went unanswered or were cut short because they were too busy with activities involving Stephanie. "Mommy, guess what?" Emma began one precious phone conversation. "Aunt Steph, Mom, she," trailed off in confusion. "It's okay, sweetheart," I said, heart splintering. "You can call me whatever makes you comfortable. Stephanie says we can call her Mom now that she and Daddy are getting married." The casually delivered news of their engagement knocked the breath from my lungs. Our divorce wasn't even finalized, yet they were already planning their wedding. My parents, who should have been my strongest allies, had fully embraced Stephanie's version of events. They sent polite but distant emails checking on my recovery while enthusiastically participating in holidays and celebrations with Michael and Stephanie. Photos on social media showed family gatherings I hadn't been invited to: Thanksgiving dinner, Christmas morning, the twins' birthday party, with Stephanie occupying what had once been my place at the table. Complete isolation descended. Former colleagues avoided eye contact when we crossed paths. Neighborhood friends whose children had played with the twins for years now pretended not to see me at the grocery store. The few dating attempts I made ended abruptly when men inevitably Googled me and found the digital breadcrumbs of unstable behavior Stephanie had carefully cultivated through mutual acquaintances. The lowest point came during a supervised visitation at the park. Noah pointed to a woman pushing a stroller across the playground. "That's Mrs. Rodriguez, my teacher," he said. "She thinks you're my aunt." "What? Why would she think that?" He shrugged with a child's nonchalance about adult complications. "Stephanie came to parent-teacher night as our mom. She told everyone she's our real mom, and you're our aunt who's a little sick in the head." The room tilted sideways as I processed this information, the systematic erasure of even my biological connection to my children. The social worker, noticing my distress, ended the visitation early, making another note that would undoubtedly reinforce the narrative of my instability. It was during this darkest period that Uncle Frank unexpectedly reappeared in my life. My father's brother had always been the family maverick, unmarried, semi-retired from a successful construction business, spending half the year traveling in his custom RV. He'd missed most family gatherings for years, making him the one relative unaffected by Stephanie's campaign. His knock on my apartment door came on a rainy Tuesday evening. I opened it to find his weathered face, more lined than I remembered, but with the same kind eyes. "Uncle Frank? What are you doing here?" He held up a bottle of decent whiskey. "Thought you might need a friendly ear and a stiff drink." We sat at my tiny kitchen table as I poured out the whole sordid story: the career sabotage, the affair, the custody battle, the ongoing gaslighting campaign. Unlike everyone else, Frank listened without judgment, asking occasional clarifying questions but never doubting my sanity. "Your sister always was a piece of work," he said finally, refilling our glasses. "I remember when you were kids, the way she'd break your toys then cry to your parents that you'd done it. The way she'd wear your new clothes before you got the chance, then return them slightly damaged. Small things back then, but the pattern was there." Validation from someone who'd known us both since childhood felt like the first clean breath after nearly drowning. "Everyone thinks I'm crazy," I whispered. "Sometimes I wonder if they're right." Frank leaned forward, eyes intense. "Listen to me, Rebecca. I've seen this before, not with siblings, but with business partners. There are people in this world who don't create anything themselves, they just appropriate what others build. Your sister is one of them. She doesn't want her own life. She wants yours. And she's frighteningly good at taking it. What do I do? She has everything now. My career, my husband, even my children call her mom." "You fight," he said simply. "Not like you have been reacting to each new attack, always on defense. You need a comprehensive strategy to reclaim what matters most. The twins." "Exactly. The rest, the job, the husband, those are replaceable. Your children aren't." For the next 2 weeks, Uncle Frank became my strategist and cheerleader. He helped me organize documentation of Stephanie's manipulation, suggested approaches for rebuilding relationships with the twins outside the artificial constraints of supervised visitation, even offered financial help so I could consult a different lawyer about reopening the custody case. "I've never had kids of my own," he explained, "but I understand something about injustice. What's happening to you isn't right, and I won't stand by while it continues." His unexpected support rekindled the fighting spirit I'd nearly lost. For the first time in months, I began to believe I might recover some piece of my former life, not the marriage, which I now recognized had been built on shaky foundations, but my relationship with Emma and Noah, which Stephanie could imitate but never truly replace. Then, just as suddenly as he'd appeared, Uncle Frank was gone. The call came on a Sunday morning. He'd suffered a massive heart attack in his sleep, found by the neighbor who checked on his condo when newspapers accumulated on the doorstep. "I'm sorry to inform you so impersonally," said the neighbor, a Mr. Geller who'd found my number in Frank's contacts. "The paramedics said it was instantaneous. He wouldn't have suffered. Small comfort for another devastating loss." Frank had been my only ally, the one person who believed my version of events without question. The funeral arrangements were handled by my parents, who informed me via text message of the service details. They didn't mention whether I'd be welcome to attend. I arrived at the cemetery to find I wasn't. A temporary restraining order filed that morning by Stephanie prohibited me from coming within 100 feet of her, Michael, or the twins, all conveniently present at the graveside service. "For everyone's emotional well-being," the court document explained, citing my unpredictable behavior as justification. So I watched my uncle's funeral from my car parked on a distant hill, binoculars allowing me glimpses of the gathered mourners. My parents, gray-haired and stooped with grief. Michael, appropriately somber in a dark suit. Stephanie, elegant in black, one arm around each of my children, the picture of maternal comfort. The perfect family tableau, with me erased entirely. As the service concluded and mourners dispersed, my phone rang an unfamiliar local number. "Is this Rebecca Mitchell?" asked a formal male voice when I answered. "Yes. Who's calling?" "Robert Davenport. From Davenport, Meyer and Associates. I'm your uncle, Frank Mitchell's attorney. He left some rather specific instructions regarding his will, particularly as they pertain to you. Could you come to my office tomorrow morning?" Numb with grief yet flickering with curiosity, I agreed to the 10 o'clock appointment. "One more thing, Miss Mitchell. Frank was quite insistent that his final arrangements for you be kept strictly confidential from other family members. I trust you'll honor that request." For the first time in months, I felt the faintest spark of hope. Uncle Frank, it seemed, had one last card to play. The offices of Davenport, Meyer and Associates occupied the 14th floor of a downtown high-rise far more impressive than I'd expected for Uncle Frank, who'd always projected an image of modest success rather than wealth. The receptionist directed me to a conference room where Robert Davenport waited with a leather portfolio and silver coffee service. "Thank you for coming, Miss Mitchell," he said, rising to shake my hand. "Frank spoke very highly of you." "We reconnected only recently," I admitted. "I wish we'd had more time." He felt the same way. Davenport opened his portfolio. "Your uncle made significant changes to his will 2 weeks ago, following your conversations. He was quite explicit about his intentions." He slid a document across the polished table. "Frank left the bulk of his estate to various charitable organizations, with specific bequests to several family members. Your portion is somewhat unconventional." I scanned the legal language until I reached the relevant paragraph. "To my niece Rebecca Mitchell, I leave the sum of $80,000, to be dispersed under the following condition. These funds must be used exclusively for the purpose of reclaiming what was wrongfully taken from her. Should Rebecca decline this conditional bequest or fail to utilize the funds for their intended purpose within 1 year, the amount shall revert to the estate's general charitable distribution." "Reclaiming what was wrongfully taken?" I repeated, confused. "What exactly does that mean?" Davenport reached into his portfolio again, extracting a sealed envelope. "Frank left this personal letter for you. He said it would clarify his intentions." Alone with the envelope, after Davenport discreetly stepped out, I broke the seal with trembling fingers. Inside was a single sheet of Frank's distinctive, blocky handwriting. "Dear Rebecca, asterisk. If you're reading this, I've either met an untimely end or my doctor's warnings about my heart finally came true. Either way, don't waste grief on me. I've had a good run. Asterisk. Asterisk. What you should know. After our conversations, I hired Horizon Investigations to look into your sister's activities over the past few years. Their initial findings were concerning enough that I've arranged for you to receive the enclosed USB drive with their preliminary report, plus the financial means to continue and expand the investigation. Asterisk. Asterisk. The $80,000 is yours, with the stipulation that you use it to reclaim what matters most, your children and your good name. Not for revenge, though God knows Stephanie deserves it, but for justice and truth. Asterisk. Asterisk. The investigator you want to contact is Lisa Chambers. She's thorough, discreet, and has a special interest in cases involving psychological manipulation. Tell her I sent you. Asterisk. Asterisk. Remember what I told you. Fight smart, not just hard. Document everything. Build your case methodically. When you finally move to reclaim your life, make sure the truth is so well established that no one can dismiss it as paranoia. Asterisk. Asterisk. You are stronger than you know, Rebecca. Don't let them convince you otherwise. Asterisk. Asterisk. Your ally, always asterisk. Asterisk. Frank asterisk. Taped inside the envelope was a small USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop with hands that wouldn't quite steady. The preliminary report from Horizon Investigations contained photographs, financial records, and interview transcripts that validated my worst suspicions while revealing manipulations I hadn't even detected. The evidence suggested Stephanie had been systematically undermining me for years before making her final move. Email records showing she had redirected my client communications at Wilson & Blake 6 months before the restructuring, using a simple formula that forwarded specific messages to her account before they reached mine. Financial transactions linking her to the same consultant who had advised the company's digital restructuring. Testimony from a former barista who confirmed Stephanie regularly added prescription anti-anxiety medication to coffee she brought me, timing the doses before important meetings or family discussions. Medical records indicating Stephanie had accessed my birth control pills during a weekend visit 3 years earlier, potentially sabotaging my previous attempts to get pregnant before the twins. Most damning were text messages between Stephanie and Michael dating back 18 months before I lost my job, not just an affair, but an explicit conspiracy to gradually isolate me from friends, family, and colleagues. Dr. K agrees R needs more intensive treatment, Stephanie had written 6 months ago. Said with right documentation we could petition for involuntary commitment. Temporary at first, but could become permanent if she resists treatment. Michael's response. Still feels extreme. What if she eventually accepts our relationship? She won't. You know, Rebecca, she'll fight until she has nothing left. Easier this way. Trust me. I sat in the law office conference room, staring at the evidence of my sister's sociopathic manipulation, feeling simultaneously vindicated and horrified. It hadn't been paranoia. If anything, I'd underestimated the extent of her calculated takeover of my life. When Davenport returned, I'd composed myself enough to ask practical questions about accessing the funds and whether Frank's bequest would become known to the rest of the family. Your uncle established a separate trust account for this purpose, he explained. As far as the official will reading will reveal, you've been left a modest sum for personal development. The specific conditions and actual amount remain confidential between us. And the investigation materials? Legally obtained, but kept separate from the estate documentation. Frank was quite concerned about potential interference if certain parties learned of his actions on your behalf. That afternoon, I met Lisa Chambers at a quiet cafe far from my usual haunts. Middle-aged with prematurely silver hair and the watchful eyes of someone accustomed to observing rather than being observed, she reviewed the preliminary findings while I anxiously shredded a paper napkin. Your uncle hired us just 10 days before his death, she confirmed. We'd barely scratched the surface, but what we found concerned him greatly. He called the day before he died to authorize an expanded investigation, regardless of cost. What exactly would that entail? A comprehensive background investigation into your sister's pattern of behavior, not just in relation to you. Financial forensics to trace any irregularities in how she obtained your position. Medical consultation regarding the potential drugging. And surveillance to document ongoing manipulation of your children and former husband. Is any of this admissible in court? Some is, some isn't. But court isn't necessarily your primary battlefield right now. Lisa's expression softened slightly. From what your uncle shared, your most immediate problem is that everyone thinks you're unstable. Evidence of a methodical campaign against you changes that narrative not just legally, but socially and professionally. Over the next 3 months, Lisa's investigation uncovered a pattern of behavior that extended far beyond my situation. Stephanie had apparently done similar, if less extreme, versions of identity appropriation throughout her life. A college roommate who'd mysteriously fallen ill during finals week while Stephanie took her place in a prestigious internship interview, a former boyfriend whose ex-girlfriend reported harassment that was later traced to Stephanie using his email account, multiple instances of minor credit card fraud and identity theft in cities where Stephanie had briefly lived. Prescription records showing she regularly obtained anti-anxiety medications despite having no diagnosed condition requiring them. The financial investigation revealed how she'd managed her rapid rise at Wilson and Blake, inappropriate relationships with 2 senior executives, blackmail material on a third, and systematic credit stealing from multiple colleagues beyond just me. Your sister appears to have narcissistic personality disorder with pronounced antisocial tendencies, explained Dr. Harrison, the psychiatric consultant Lisa engaged to review the evidence. She doesn't just want success, she specifically wants your success, your life. It's not enough for her to win. You must lose. And she's willing to cross ethical and legal boundaries to ensure that outcome. Most disturbing were the ongoing surveillance reports documenting how Stephanie continued manipulating my children. She regularly made disparaging comments about me within their hearing, coached them before and after my supervised visitations, gradually replaced family photos containing me with nearly identical versions featuring herself instead. She's creating an alternative history, Lisa observed. In a few years, your children might genuinely misremember their early childhood with her in your role. The investigation also revealed Michael's growing discomfort with the situation. Surveillance captured multiple arguments between him and Stephanie, particularly regarding her treatment of the twins. "I'm not saying we should let Rebecca have unsupervised visits yet," he was recorded saying, "but the kids miss her. This mom business is confusing them." Stephanie's response was chilling. "They'll adjust. Children are adaptable. In a year, they'll barely remember it was ever different." As evidence mounted, my initial impulse toward public exposure and legal confrontation evolved into a more strategic approach. Lisa helped me understand that directly challenging Stephanie, who had manipulated the legal and medical systems against me, risked appearing exactly as unstable as she'd painted me. "Your sister has created a reality where any frontal attack from you reinforces her narrative," Lisa explained. "You need to change the battlefield entirely." Together, we developed a comprehensive strategy focused not on punishing Stephanie, but on systematically reclaiming my relationship with my children, rebuilding my professional credibility, and gradually exposing the truth to key individuals whose support would matter most. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoration of my identity, my maternal relationship, and most importantly, my children's right to know their actual history, rather than the fabricated version Stephanie was constructing. "Your uncle was right," Lisa told me as we finalized our approach. "This isn't just about fighting back. It's about fighting smart with evidence, patience, and precision." For the first time since my life had imploded, I felt something beyond despair or rage. I felt clarity of purpose. And with Uncle Frank's unexpected gift, I finally had the resources to act on it. Armed with overwhelming evidence and Uncle Frank's financial support, I could have pursued a straightforward legal assault filing for custody modification, pressing charges for identity theft and fraud, exposing Stephanie's manipulation through the courts. But Lisa's counsel proved invaluable. Direct confrontation would play into the unstable ex-wife narrative Stephanie had so carefully constructed. "Right now, your sister controls the story," Lisa explained as we outlined our strategy. "She's positioned herself as the stable, nurturing maternal figure who stepped in when you became unstable. Attacking that narrative head-on will only entrench it further. Instead, we crafted a three-pronged approach: professional rehabilitation, strategic alliance building, and careful documentation of Stephanie's ongoing manipulation, all while maintaining a facade of resigned acceptance that would lull her into complacency." The professional rehabilitation began with a complete transformation. Using a portion of Uncle Frank's bequest, I rented a small but impressive office in a business district 20 miles from my former workplace. Under the business name Mitchell Consulting, I established a legitimate marketing consultancy not to actually build a client base, but to create a credible professional presence. "Perception drives reality," Lisa advised. "You need to look successful before anyone will believe you are successful." I invested in a wardrobe that projected confident professionalism without mimicking my former corporate style, changed my hair color from chestnut brown to a sophisticated auburn, added subtle cosmetic touches, not a dramatic makeover that would signal desperation, but enough change to visually separate me from the unstable Rebecca Stephanie had described to everyone. The psychological impact of this external transformation surprised me. Each morning, dressing in tailored clothing to work from a real office rather than a cramped apartment restored a sense of identity. Stephanie hadn't managed to steal my competence, my business acumen, my professional confidence. Strategic alliance building proved more challenging. My first tentative outreach was to Diane Peterson, a former Wilson and Blake colleague who'd left before the restructuring. Our coffee meeting began awkwardly, with Diane clearly uncomfortable about the rumors she'd heard. "I always wondered about the timing," she admitted, after I carefully shared selected pieces of evidence. "You were brilliant at campaign development, but suddenly couldn't manage basic client relationships? It never made sense." Diane introduced me to Marcus Kingsley, who'd been fired during the same restructuring. His experience paralleled mine, ideas appropriated, client relationships undermined, reputation damaged through whisper campaigns. Stephanie needed my team consolidated with hers to secure the promotion, he confirmed. I didn't connect the dots until months later. More former colleagues emerged with similar stories once Marcus vouched for me. Not all had been directly harmed by Stephanie, but many had witnessed her manipulative tactics without recognizing the pattern. Together, they formed a quiet network of professional references who could eventually counter the unstable employee narrative Stephanie had created. The personal alliance building required even more delicacy. I began with peripheral social connections, parents from the twins' school, neighbors from our former community, approaching each with carefully constructed chance encounters that allowed for brief, normal interactions. Not mentioning Stephanie or the custody situation, just presenting myself as a stable, reasonable person rebuilding after divorce. Remember, you're playing the long game, Lisa reminded me when I grew frustrated with the slow pace. Each positive interaction chips away at the foundation of Stephanie's narrative. The most valuable alliance came unexpectedly through Sarah, Emma's dance teacher, who had expressed early doubts about Stephanie's version of events. During a recital I attended as a spectator, sitting far from Michael and Stephanie, Sarah approached during intermission. "Emma talks about you constantly during class," she confided. "She's confused about why she doesn't see you more often. And lately, she's been asking questions about whether Stephanie is really her mother." Sarah became an invaluable ally, providing updates about Emma's emotional state and subtly reinforcing the truth about our biological relationship during private moments. "I just tell her that families come in many forms, but you will always be her birth mother, regardless of who lives with her now." Similar allies emerged gradually. Noah's soccer coach, who noticed how Stephanie subtly undermined the boy's confidence while presenting herself as supportively maternal. The school librarian who observed Emma's confusion when Stephanie tried replacing favorite mother-daughter reading rituals with her own versions. These relationships, carefully cultivated over months, created a counter-narrative to Stephanie's portrayal of me as dangerously unstable, not through dramatic confrontations or accusations, but through consistent, rational presence that contradicted what people had been led to believe. Meanwhile, Lisa's ongoing surveillance documented Stephanie's increasingly erratic behavior as her perfect narrative began developing cracks. Michael's growing discomfort with her excessive control over the twins. The twins' confusion about family history as Stephanie attempted to insert herself into memories of events that predated her involvement. Most significantly, we discovered Stephanie had begun an affair with Gregory Phillips, Michael's direct supervisor, at the architectural firm, creating leverage similar to what she'd used in her professional advancement. Surveillance photos captured their meetings at an upscale hotel. Text messages outlined how Gregory could help fast-track Michael's partnership application with the right motivation. I also learned Stephanie had been systematically transferring funds from the joint accounts she now shared with Michael into private accounts under her maiden name. Financial records obtained through Lisa's investigation revealed a pattern of increasing withdrawals, coinciding with Michael's recent promotion and salary increase. "She's setting up an exit strategy," Lisa observed. "The question is whether she plans to leave with or without the children." The surveillance also captured concerning incidents of Stephanie's mask, slipping around the twins' moments of harsh discipline when Michael wasn't present, followed by excessive affection when he returned. Emma, especially, seemed increasingly withdrawn in Stephanie's presence, while Noah had developed a nervous stutter. All this evidence was meticulously compiled, organized, and secured both physically and digitally. Not deployed immediately, but assembled for the moment when it would have maximum impact. "The court of public opinion often determines the court of law," Lisa advised. "We need both on your side before making any formal moves." Throughout this preparation phase, I maintained my court-ordered supervised visitations with the twins, now approaching with calm confidence rather than desperate anxiety. I never criticized Stephanie or Michael, never questioned the children about home life, simply focused on creating positive experiences within the constraints imposed. The children responded to this changed approach. Without the emotional turbulence of my earlier visits, they gradually relaxed, sharing more authentic moments rather than the guarded interactions Stephanie had orchestrated. "Mom, I found your old bracelet in the attic," Emma whispered during one visit, slipping a tarnished silver charm bracelet into my hand. Stephanie wanted to throw it away, but I kept it. "It has my birthday on it." The bracelet, a family heirloom my grandmother had given me, with charms marking significant dates including the twins' birth, was tangible evidence of Stephanie's effort to erase even physical reminders of my existence from the children's lives. "Thank you for keeping this safe," I replied, carefully returning it to her. "Maybe you can keep it for both of us until we have more time together." That small exchange, her secret act of loyalty, my measured response without vilifying Stephanie, marked a turning point in rebuilding our relationship despite the severe restrictions. By the 9th month of implementation, my plan had progressed beyond initial expectations. I had established a credible professional presence that contradicted the unemployable narrative, built a network of allies who could testify to my stability and competence, collected substantial evidence of Stephanie's manipulations, financial irregularities, and inappropriate behavior, begun rebuilding authentic relationships with Emma and Noah during limited visitations, documented Stephanie's ongoing affairs and financial deceptions against Michael. Most importantly, I'd undergone a profound internal transformation from reactive victim to strategic architect of my own reconstruction. The confident, capable woman Stephanie had tried to destroy hadn't just survived. She'd emerged stronger, more deliberate, and infinitely more dangerous to Stephanie's elaborate fiction. The time had come to move from preparation to action. Not with the emotional outbursts Stephanie would expect and could easily discredit, but with the calculated precision of someone who understood exactly what she was reclaiming and exactly how to do it. The dismantling of Stephanie's carefully constructed reality began not with dramatic confrontation, but with a series of seemingly coincidental events designed to expose the contradictions in her narrative without directly challenging it. Phase 1 focused on rebuilding my relationship with the twins outside the artificial constraints of supervised visitation. Using information from Sarah about Emma's dance schedule and Noah's soccer practices, I arranged to accidentally encounter them in public spaces where custody restrictions were harder to enforce. "Mom?" Emma's startled expression during our first chance meeting at the public library melted into cautious delight. "Are you here for story time too?" "I volunteer here on Thursdays," I explained truthfully, having started the arrangement specifically for this purpose. "Would you like to help me set up the puppet theater?" These encounters, carefully documented by Lisa to establish their innocent nature, allowed for natural interactions outside the sterile visitation center. Sometimes Michael accompanied the children, creating opportunities to demonstrate my calm, reasonable demeanor rather than the unstable ex-wife he expected. During one such encounter at the Children's Science Museum, I noticed Michael watching with furrowed brow as Noah enthusiastically showed me his experiment with circuit boards, the easy rapport between us contradicting Stephanie's insistence that the children feared my unpredictable behavior. "He's doing really well in science this year," Michael commented awkwardly when Noah ran ahead to the next exhibit. "He always had a natural curiosity," I replied neutrally. "Your father was the same way." The casual reference to family history, something Stephanie couldn't share or replace, landed subtly but effectively. Michael's expression shifted from suspicion to something like recognition, as if suddenly remembering the shared past Stephanie had worked so hard to erase. These interactions gradually increased in frequency and duration, each reinforcing the reality that I was neither unstable nor threatening, just a mother who loved her children. The twins began asking Michael for more contact, creating internal pressure that surveillance revealed was causing increasing tension between him and Stephanie. "They're my kids too," Michael was recorded saying during one heated argument. "If they want to see their mother at soccer games, what's the harm?" "The restraining order," Stephanie began, "was your idea, not mine," he interrupted. "And maybe it's time to reconsider if it's actually helping anyone." Phase 2 involved strategic information deployment to key individuals whose support or opposition would significantly impact any legal proceedings. Not through confrontational accusations, but through carefully timed revelations that allowed each person to feel they'd discovered the truth independently. Michael received an anonymous envelope containing financial records, documenting Stephanie's systematic siphoning of their joint accounts, alongside photographs of her meetings with his boss. Not enough evidence to prove an affair, but sufficient to raise serious questions about her financial fidelity and professional ethics. Surveillance confirmed he confronted her that evening, though Stephanie's practiced manipulation initially deflected his suspicions. "Someone's obviously trying to create problems between us," she insisted, turning the situation into another attack on her innocence. "Probably, Rebecca, you know how vindictive she's been, but the seed was planted, especially when additional anonymous information arrived a week later showing Stephanie's recent application for an apartment in her name, only something that contradicted her professed commitment to their future together." My parents, who had fully embraced Stephanie's version of events, received a different package: medical records detailing psychiatric medications prescribed to Stephanie rather than me, alongside transcripts of contradictory statements she'd made about my mental health to different authorities. Their initial reaction was disbelief, but the documentation was too thorough to dismiss entirely. My mother called for the first time in months, her voice uncertain. "Rebecca, we've received some concerning information about Stephanie. I'm not sure what to make of it." "I understand your confusion," I replied carefully, following Lisa's coaching. "This must be difficult after everything you've been told. I'm open to talking whenever you're ready." The restrained response, neither defensive nor accusatory, contradicted their expectation of emotional instability, creating cognitive dissonance that slowly began eroding Stephanie's influence. Similar, carefully curated information packages reached others in our extended family and social circle, not all at once, which would suggest a coordinated campaign, but in a natural progression that allowed each revelation to build upon previous doubts. The most direct confrontation occurred at the Wilson and Blake Annual Client Appreciation Gala, an event I hadn't been invited to but had legitimate access to through my new professional connections. Stephanie, now holding my former director position, was scheduled to present the agency's successful campaigns to gathered clients. I arrived late, drawing minimal attention, positioning myself where Stephanie would notice me only after beginning her presentation. The momentary shock when she spotted me in the audience caused a subtle but noticeable break in her polished delivery, a hesitation that wouldn't mean anything to most observers, but signaled her first realization that I was no longer hiding in defeated isolation. During the networking session afterward, I approached her calmly, maintaining appropriate social distance while ensuring others could observe our interaction. "Lovely presentation, Stephanie," I said pleasantly, loud enough for nearby executives to hear, especially the Luxe Cosmetics campaign. "I'm glad you retained the core strategy I developed before leaving the firm." Her smile remained fixed while her eyes flashed with momentary panic. "Rebecca, I didn't expect to see you here. Are you doing well?" "Never better, actually. Mitchell Consulting is exceeding projections this quarter. I should thank you. Losing my position here created an unexpected opportunity to serve clients more directly." Several former colleagues observed this exchange with evident surprise, not just at my presence, but at the confident professionalism that contradicted rumors of my breakdown. Stephanie's attempts to dismiss me to concerned onlookers afterward only highlighted the contrast between her agitated defensiveness and my composed demeanor. The carefully orchestrated public encounters culminated in what appeared to be an impulsive recording, but was actually a meticulously planned documentation. During a heated argument at the twins' school concert, which Stephanie had tried to prevent me from attending, despite it being a public event, she finally lost the careful control she'd maintained. "Those are my children now," she hissed, unaware that multiple parents were within earshot and my phone was recording. "My husband, my house, my life. "You're nothing but a footnote, Rebecca. A cautionary tale we'll eventually stop telling altogether." The mask had slipped completely, revealing the calculated malevolence behind the concerned sister facade. 3 separate witnesses heard the exchange, including the school principal, who had previously sympathized with Stephanie's portrayal of me as unstable. The recording, legally obtained in our state's one-party consent laws, became the centerpiece of my formal petition to modify the custody arrangement, supported by affidavits from witnesses who had observed Stephanie's behavior firsthand. Michael's disillusionment accelerated when he discovered financial irregularities in their joint accounts that perfectly matched the anonymous information he'd received. His own attorney advised him to distance himself from Stephanie pending investigation, creating the first significant crack in their united front. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he admitted during a court-ordered mediation session. "But the kids have been asking for their mother, their birth mother, and I can't keep making excuses." The court-appointed guardian ad litem, assigned to evaluate the children's best interests independent of either parent's claims, interviewed Emma and Noah separately and reported concerning confusion about family relationships and history. Both children expressed love for their mother, meaning Miss Rebecca Mitchell, while describing confusion about Miss Stephanie Mitchell's insistence on being called Mom, her report stated. "There appears to be significant pressure on the children to align with narrative that contradicts their own memories and understanding. When presented with the mounting evidence of manipulation, financial impropriety, and psychological impact on the children, Judge Harmon, the same judge who had granted the initial custody order, ordered an immediate review of all previous testimony and evaluations. The court appears to have been provided incomplete and potentially misleading information during original proceedings," he noted during a preliminary hearing. "Until a complete evaluation can be conducted, joint temporary custody will be implemented to minimize further disruption to the minor children." Stephanie's desperate attempts to maintain control grew increasingly erratic as her carefully constructed narrative unraveled. She accused me of fabricating evidence, bribing witnesses, even manipulating the children against her claims that only highlighted the projection of her own tactics. During the final custody hearing, I maintained the composed demeanor I'd cultivated throughout the process, presenting evidence methodically without emotional accusations. Stephanie, by contrast, interrupted proceedings multiple times with outbursts that undermined her claims about my instability while demonstrating her own. "She's turning everyone against me," she finally shouted, rising from her seat despite her attorney's restraining hand. "She's always been jealous of me, always tried to sabotage my happiness." The ironic role reversal wasn't lost on anyone in the courtroom, least of all Judge Harmon, whose skeptical expression spoke volumes about how thoroughly the original narrative had been reversed. The modified custody order granted equal physical custody with a carefully structured transition plan to minimize disruption for the twins. Most significantly, the judge lifted all restrictions regarding supervision, explicitly noting that previous concerns about Miss Rebecca Mitchell's stability appear to have been significantly overstated based on incomplete or misleading evidence. When offered the opportunity to press criminal charges against Stephanie for identity theft, fraud, and potential drugging, I made the difficult but deliberate choice to decline. "This has never been about punishment," I explained to Lisa, who questioned the decision. "It's about reclaiming what matters most, my relationship with my children and my reputation. Dragging this into criminal court would only extend the trauma for Emma and Noah." Stephanie faced consequences nonetheless. Wilson and Blake launched an internal investigation into her business practices, following reports from multiple employees about similar patterns of appropriation and manipulation. Michael filed for divorce after discovering the extent of her financial deceptions and ongoing affair with his supervisor. Most painfully for her, the children began openly questioning the narrative she'd constructed, especially as they spent more time with me in an environment free from manipulation. Their natural memories of our early years together gradually reasserted themselves, contradicting the alternative history Stephanie had tried to implant. "Why did Stephanie tell us you were sick when you weren't?" Noah asked during one of our first unsupervised weekends together. Was she the sick one? People sometimes do hurtful things when they're unhappy with their own lives, I explained carefully, following the family therapist's guidance about age-appropriate honesty without vilification. What matters is that we're together now, and no one can change the fact that I'm your mom. The final confrontation with Stephanie occurred not in a courtroom, but in the elementary school parking lot after the twins' spring concert, the first school event we'd all attended since the custody modification. She approached as I helped the children into my car for my custodial weekend. "This isn't over," she stated flatly, all pretense of sisterly concern abandoned. "You've turned everyone against me with your lies." I regarded her calmly, recognizing the desperate attempt to provoke a reaction that would validate her narrative. "No, Stephanie, I simply showed everyone the truth, including myself. I hope someday you find whatever's missing that makes you need to take from others instead of building your own life." Her expression flickered between rage and something that might have been momentary self-awareness before hardening again. "You always thought you were better than me." "No," I replied, as the twins buckled their seatbelts, oblivious to the exchange. "I just finally realized you always thought you were me." She had no response to that fundamental truth, that her elaborate scheme had never been about wanting what I had, but about wanting to be me entirely. As I drove away with my children chattering happily in the back seat, Stephanie remained standing alone in the parking lot, surrounded by the fragments of a stolen life she could no longer maintain. The gradual restoration of my life unfolded over the following year, not as a perfect recreation of what existed before, but as something new shaped by hard-won wisdom and deliberate choices rather than circumstances. The court formalized our custody arrangement 6 months after the temporary order, granting equal parenting time structured around the twins' school schedule. The detailed judgment specifically acknowledged the systematic campaign of misinformation that had influenced previous custody decisions and established protocols to prevent future manipulation. When Michael's attorney approached about potential reconciliation during divorce proceedings with Stephanie, I declined without hesitation. "We share children and history," I told him during a co-parenting discussion. "That's enough connection for now." His betrayal, allowing himself to be manipulated into our family's destruction, even as he benefited from it, wasn't something I could simply forgive. But for Emma and Noah's sake, I committed to civil, cooperative co-parenting focused exclusively on their well-being. Over time, this limited relationship developed a respectful rhythm as Michael gradually acknowledged his role in enabling Stephanie's takeover. "I should have seen what was happening," he admitted, during a parent-teacher conference we attended together. "She was so convincing, and it was easier to believe you were the problem than to question what I was getting from the situation." "We all have blind spots where our desires are concerned," I replied, neither absolving nor condemning him. The past couldn't be undone, but our children deserved parents who could model accountability and growth. Stephanie's departure from our lives came not through dramatic expulsion but gradual irrelevance. After losing both her relationship with Michael and her position at Wilson and Blake following the internal investigation, she relocated to Arizona for a fresh start. Her attempts to maintain contact with the twins received increasingly lukewarm responses as they processed their confusion and hurt over her deceptions. "Is Stephanie still our aunt?" Emma asked during a family therapy session. "Biologically, yes," I answered carefully. "But relationships are about more than biology. When you're older, you can decide what kind of relationship you want with her, if any." Professional rebuilding took an unexpected turn when Mitchell Consulting, established initially as a credibility prop, attracted legitimate clients through referrals from my reconstructed network. Rather than returning to corporate marketing, I discovered genuine satisfaction in consulting work that allowed greater flexibility for parenting responsibilities. Several former colleagues from Wilson and Blake eventually joined my growing agency, including Marcus Kingsley, who had also experienced Stephanie's professional sabotage. Together, we created a collaborative work environment explicitly designed to recognize and reward individual contributions rather than foster internal competition. "I never wanted to run my own business," I confessed to Lisa during our final professional meeting. But building something from scratch after losing everything has been unexpectedly empowering. That's often how it works, she replied with a knowing smile. What we're forced to create after devastation ends up stronger than what we originally lost. The healing process with my parents progressed more gradually. Their initial tentative reconciliation attempts, driven more by overwhelming evidence than genuine remorse, evolved into deeper reflection as they confronted their own role in enabling Stephanie's manipulation throughout our lives. We always made excuses for her, my mother acknowledged during a difficult conversation. It seemed easier than holding her accountable. I never imagined the pattern would escalate to this extent. Rebuilding trust required honest confrontation of painful truths, how they had consistently privileged Stephanie's needs above mine since childhood, establishing the dynamic she eventually exploited to devastating effect. Through family therapy and individual effort, we slowly constructed a more balanced relationship, though the scars remained visible in moments of stress or conflict. The most profound healing occurred with Emma and Noah, whose resilience continually amazed me. Free from Stephanie's manipulation, they gradually processed the confusing period when Aunt Steffi tried to be mom through age-appropriate therapy and honest conversation. Sometimes people pretend to be something they're not because they don't like themselves, Noah observed with 8-year-old directness. Like when Parker wears superhero costumes to school because he gets scared during math tests. Their innate understanding that Stephanie's behavior reflected her own brokenness rather than their worth helped shield them from lasting damage. As months passed, references to that period became less frequent, replaced by excitement about current activities and future plans. The court-mandated therapy addressed not just the confusion from Stephanie's manipulation, but also the painful separation they'd experienced. We carefully rebuilt attachment and trust through consistent presence and honest communication appropriate to their developmental stage. "Were you really sad when you couldn't live with us?" Emma asked during a quiet moment. "Sadder than I've ever been," I answered truthfully. "But I never stopped loving you or believing we'd be together again." The legal closure of Uncle Frank's estate brought an unexpected final message. His lawyer contacted me on the 1-year anniversary of receiving the bequest, explaining that Frank had left a second letter to be delivered only after the funds were fully dispersed. This envelope, thicker than the first, contained several handwritten pages and photographs I'd never seen Frank with his brother, my grandfather, in their younger years, smiling arm in arm. Asterisk. "Dear Rebecca," asterisk, the letter began. Asterisk, if you're reading this, then you've used the resources I left you to reclaim what matters most. I'm only sorry I couldn't be there to witness it. Asterisk. Frank revealed a history I'd never known, how his own brother had once betrayed him in business, taking credit for Frank's innovations and excluding him from the resulting success. Rather than pursuing vengeance, Frank had rebuilt independently, eventually achieving greater success than his brother had through appropriation. Asterisk. The hardest lesson I learned was that forgiveness isn't for the person who wronged you, it's for yourself. Not forgetting or excusing, but refusing to let another person's brokenness define your future. Your sister took much from you, but she couldn't take your resilience, your intelligence, or your capacity for love unless you surrendered them. Asterisk. His final paragraphs offered perspective I wasn't yet ready to embrace, but recognized as eventually necessary. Asterisk. Someday, when the wounds are less raw, you might consider that Stephanie's desperate need to become you reveals a profound emptiness no external acquisition could ever fill. Her tragedy isn't what she lost, but what she never developed within herself. You, however, have proven that your worth exists independent of external validation or possessions. That's something she can never take or replicate, no matter how convincingly she wears your life. Asterisk. After reading Frank's letter, I drove alone to the cemetery where he was buried, bringing flowers and the updated custody order I knew would have pleased him. "You were right about everything," I told his headstone, feeling somehow certain he could hear. "Especially about fighting smart instead of just fighting back. I wish you could see the twins now they're thriving. The final piece of reclamation came 6 months later, when I purchased a modest but cheerful house with a yard large enough for the twins to play. Not an attempt to replicate the colonial home I'd shared with Michael, but a fresh start spaces designed around our current needs rather than past expectations. Emma and Noah helped choose their bedroom colors and arranged their belongings with the excitement of creating something new rather than recovering something lost. As we unpacked, Emma discovered the silver charm bracelet she'd rescued from the attic years earlier. "Can I add my own charm?" she asked, turning the tarnished heirloom in her hands. Of course, this bracelet is about continuing family history, not just preserving it. Together, we selected a small silver phoenix charm, her choice, not mine, to mark this new chapter. The symbolism wasn't lost on me as I fastened it alongside charms representing generations of family milestones. That evening, watching the twins play in the backyard of our new home, I reflected on the profound truth that had emerged from 3 years of devastation and rebuilding. Some things cannot be taken if you don't surrender them: your authentic self, your capacity for growth, your ability to create meaning from adversity. Stephanie had taken my job, my husband, my home, even temporarily my children, external manifestations of identity that could be appropriated. But in forcing me to rebuild from nothing, she had inadvertently revealed the indestructible core that no amount of manipulation could replicate or destroy. The person who emerged from that crucible was stronger, wiser, and paradoxically more authentic than the successful but somewhat complacent woman whose life had been so systematically dismantled. The phoenix charm on Emma's bracelet represented not just survival, but transformation for all of us. As darkness fell and I called the twins in for dinner, I silently thanked Uncle Frank for understanding exactly what I'd needed to reclaim, not just external possessions or relationships, but the internal certainty that who I am exists independent of what I have. That was the truth Stephanie had never grasped, the lesson she might never learn. And in that understanding lay not just recovery, but freedom. If you've ever experienced betrayal by someone close to you, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. How did you rebuild trust afterward? What helped you heal? Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that even when everything seems lost, reclamation is possible. Thank you for listening to my journey from devastation to rebuilding. Remember that your worth isn't determined by what others take from you, but by what you choose to create afterward.